Hello and welcome to Getaway Day. This is a mini podcast on the Cubs, who have seen the most roster turnover of any major league team since the end of the lockout, making all kinds of additions. If you're watching a Cubs game this season and you're looking for Chris Bryant or Anthony Rizzo or Javier Baez, you're probably not going to see them. And um, it's a whole bunch of new faces. So they've brought in the biggest signing of the offseason was the acquisition of Seiya Suzuki, Japanese superstar right fielder. Played 9 years professionally in Japan. He's joining this team to kind of be their star player, kind of in the middle of the lineup. They also brought in Jan Gomes to back up Wilson Contreras or take over if Contreras ends up getting traded sometime mid-season. Jonathan VR, Clint Frazier. Um, on the pitching side, Marcus Stroman on a 3-year deal, Drew Smiley, and then a whole bunch of relievers: David Robertson, Michael Givens, Chris Martin, Daniel Norris, Jesse Chavez. So lots of new Cubs.
The
They
return of
definitely
the return of the nighttime sunglasses, Jesse Chavez.
yes, that's right. So pitching was a huge issue for the Cubs last year, especially starting pitching. They did bring in Wade Miley, who's going to start the season on the injured list with a elbow issue. Stroman helps a lot. Smiley's a nice depth guy to have around to add to Kyle Hendricks in that rotation. Um, Injuries are a huge issue for the Cubs right now in spring training with Adbert Alzolay, another guy who's supposed to be a big part of the rotation this year, is has a shoulder issue, so he's going to be out for probably half the season. And then in the bullpen, they were going to be counting on guys like Brad Wick and Cody Hoyer, who was part of the Craig Kimbrell trade last offseason or mid-season last year. Both those guys are going to be out for extended times, so they kind of got to fill a lot of innings. What do you think about the pitching staff of the Cubs right now? It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's incredibly weird. Like for me, it's I don't know. It's almost hard to even figure out like what this rotation's going to look like at any point in the year, let alone right now. Because you're going to have Stroman and Hendricks, and Smiley. I guess Alec Mills and Justin Steele, Keegan Thompson. Those are your other guys that you would be looking at, right?
Yeah,
With
and
all these injuries.
it's like how do you cover this many innings without being really creative with some of the rotation stuff. So I could see them going with some piggyback kind of starts with Steele and Thompson, guys that have shown that they've been pretty good in shorter stints rather than just as traditional starters. You kind of need a lot out of Stroman and Hendricks if you're going to be successful at all this season.
Yeah. Because the Cubs have not really been the best team at grooming pitching prospects, and so for the most part, they're going to be relying on guys that they brought in, and they don't really have a ton of depth in the minors to deal with a lot of injuries. At least if it's still the way that it's always been, that'll be the case. But
There's one pitching prospect that could play a role this year, Caleb Killian. He's going to be starting at AAA. He's never pitched at AAA before. He was one of the pieces coming back in the Chris Bryant trade from the Giants last year. So he pitched really, really well at the Arizona Fall League. Had like six perfect innings in the championship game of the AFL. So he's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on for prospect wise. But as you said, like they don't have a whole lot depth wise starting pitcher at the upper levels at least. So a lot of their amazing prospects, better prospects that they have are really, really young. So they could be years away from making to the majors or just chips for the Cubs to use in trades in the next couple of years to get back to contention.
yeah, and depending on how the recoveries of Alzolay and Wade Miley go, Jed may have to make a move here sooner than later to bring in a guy just to eat up some innings. Because over the course of a season, how many innings does a team play roughly.
It's like 1,400.
Yeah, that's a lot of innings to eat. And if you're relying on just Stroman and Hendricks to be the guys that stay healthy most of the time and eat those innings, that you're going to start turning into basically what the Phillies were doing with Nola and Wheeler last year, where you leave them in just a little too long because you
Yeah,
don't
and they
really
had
have a
the Cubs
choice.
had all kinds of issues with this last year. I think last year they used a franchise record number of players. It was like 67 or 69 players across the season. Like it was pretty tough, especially after the trade deadline on the pitching side. Um, in the lineup, it's a very mediocre lineup, I'd say. There's some interesting guys in there, and I'll point out the three guys that really impressed in their short time in the majors, all kind of like older rookies last year in Rafael Ortega, Patrick Wisdom, Frank Schwindel. They're going to all get their chances to show what they did last year when the pressure was off, whether they can do it at the beginning of the season and then like throughout a full major league season. You have any hopes for those guys?
The guy that I think has probably the best chance of repeating what he did is probably Patrick Wisdom. And that's just from the standpoint that he was a really, really highly regarded prospect. Like the talent is there. It's just, can he repeat it? And he didn't hit for great average last year. He just hit a lot of home runs.
Yeah,
And he struck out a metric crap load.
yeah. That's
40%, 40.8% strikeouts.
That's the
Um,
big thing. If he can't correct that, his time as a major leaguer is going to be quite short.
yeah.
He's
And
basically like another Miguel Sano at this point.
pretty much. And like, so his numbers from last year, as long as the power's still there, which I think it probably will be, I don't think power usually disappears in the course of one off season when you're 29, 30 years old. Um, but it would be hard for him to not hit this bar again. So I could see him repeating. Schwindel and Ortega, I think maybe overperformed themselves a little bit last year, so I would expect to see some regression there.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, so the thing that I noticed with all the Cubs free agent additions is that they kind of built themselves a really nice bench. Jonathan VR, he's a great guy to have on your team. Like I don't like the guy, but he's really useful to have because he can play second, short, third. He steals bases, hits home runs. I mean, like he's just a solid baseball player to have on your team, even if he's not that great. Um, and then they got a kind of a glut of outfielders here with Clint Frazier, Michael Hermosillo, guys that haven't proved themselves at the major league level, but can definitely hit the upper level minor league pitching. So someone's got to prove themselves here. Um, and then we haven't even mentioned the middle infield: Nico Horner, Nick Madrigal, these contact first guys. Um, it's kind of a different look for the Cubs lineup after having years of having these sluggers like Baez and Rizzo and Bryant to have guys that make a lot of contact. So I'm interested to see how they do if they can stay healthy and you know do stuff for the Cubs.
Yeah, because having Nick and Nico, like they'll be on base a pretty solid amount, but those guys don't really replace some of the offense that you're losing from KB, Javi, Rizzo if they trade Wilson midseason. Because Wilson, Seiya Suzuki, and Ian Happ are your three power guys left in that team, and none of them are like insane amounts of power. Um, Happ and Suzuki could be 30 home run guys. Like there's no doubt in my mind they could do it, but they're not 40, 45, 50 homer dudes. And Happ has been kind of up and down a little bit the last couple of years, struggling a bit. Had an amazing was it 20 or was it 19?
Yeah, the first half of 2020 was really good
Yeah.
for Hap.
So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. I think Nick and Nico are going to have to, they're going to have to get on base a lot if this team wants to win a lot of ball games because you can't really rely on just those three in the middle of the order. If guys like Ortega and Schwindel don't really live up to what they did last year. So,
Yeah. I do think that this team is better than the Reds right now,
yes.
but not by that much. And if things go poorly in the first half, you could see another kind of a sell-off situation where they end up trading a lot of their players and then they drop well below 500 in the second half. So that's kind of what I see with the Cubs right now. Like I can see a situation where they do surprise people and they finish closer to 500, but I can also see another situation where they're more like a 70-win team.
Yeah. And when comparing them to the Reds, I would say they're kind of the Cubs are better, but they're kind of an opposite direct. Di- well, no, I guess it's pretty much the same. Like you really only have one or two guys in your rotation that you're like, okay, we trust you. We know you're going to be good. The rest is dealing with injuries or really young or whatever, and then the lineup being kind of mediocre. Yeah, I guess that's a better comp. Took me a minute to think through that, but
All right. Well, that's the Cubs. That's the mini episode here. Hope you enjoyed it. Please subscribe, review, and like it everywhere that you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you next time on Getaway Day.